That's worth it right there.
What's up guys, how's it going? So one thing I really wanted to do, and I've been wanting to do this for a while, is to show you my camera setup. And basically I wanted to try and give you some ideas if you're somebody that is trying to film your hunts and maybe you're trying to make your production quality a little bit better. I've always loved filming my hunts. I've been doing this probably since, I guess, high school, middle school or high school, something like that. And one thing that I've learned throughout the years is that I had a lot of good footage, I had a lot of good ideas for stuff that I wanted to include in my videos, but I just really didn't feel like I had that good of quality footage. And for a long time I thought it was just simply the camera, and some of it was, but once you start kind of learning some little bits and pieces of photography and videography, you realize that a lot of it is really just about settings. So somebody could have the greatest camera on the market today, but if they don't have the settings right, it can look like nothing more than, you know, somebody's home movie that they shot on a camcorder. So a lot of it requires trying to learn some different things about photography and videography, you know, and there's plenty of better videos out there than what I could come up with that will explain all of that. Don't want to get too far down the camera rabbit hole, but basically wanted to try and explain a few tips here and there about some of the different things that you can use to try and help make your channel, your footage, everything that you're trying to put together a little bit better. So really one thing that I would say is probably the most important tip that I could give you is shoot your footage in 24 frames a second. When you get a camera, whatever camera you get, you can easily find a YouTube video that will kind of explain the settings of that camera. In your camera settings, you can usually shoot in 60 frames a second or 24 frames a second. If you get into a lot of slow motion stuff, you're looking at things like 120 frames per second or 240, things like that. What I have found, and this was one of those things that once I discovered it, it really kind of opened my eyes and was like, wow, this is what I've been missing. I started shooting everything in 24 frames a second because what that is giving you is basically the same frame rate as what you would get when you're watching a movie. 60 frames a second is what you get when you're watching a TV show, something like that. It's a lot faster, there's less motion blur, and some people like to shoot 60 frames a second because you can go back and you can slow that footage down. And that's okay, I mean, that's perfectly fine, but if you take the time to check your frame rates and just shoot all of your regular footage in 24 and then save your slow-mo footage, you know, flip that setting over, really, it's just better footage. So that would be probably my biggest tip. Shoot all of your footage in 24 frames a second unless you're doing slow motion. As far as the type of camera that I would recommend, if you're just starting out, maybe you're really familiar with how to run a camcorder, maybe you're more comfortable using a camcorder, I would say go with something like this. This is the Sony AX-33. When I got it used at Best Buy. It was the best price camera that I could find at the time. The AX-53 gives you a much better zoom than this one does, but what you can still get with this camera is a digital zoom, which will really push it on out a little bit further, and that's one thing that gives you a little bit more of an advantage with a camcorder than with something like a mirrorless camera. When you start trying to look at different types of lenses for a mirrorless camera, you're going to have to make some decisions. Lenses are not cheap. When you see some of these big professional type lenses, you'll get like a 2.8 and it'll be a constant aperture. Those types of lenses are going to cost probably more than what a lot of your better quality cameras are going to be. So just something to keep in mind. It's really going to get expensive when you start trying to look at a lens like that. Basically, if you're trying to get started and you really feel like the best thing for you is to use a camcorder, this is probably the most reasonable option that you could get. The nice thing about this particular camera is it's kind of got its own little gimbal in it, so it really helps out with the image stabilization. You've got all the little parts in there that just kind of float, so that anytime you're walking around, it's going to stay a little bit more stable, and that's a pretty big advantage. So when I was trying to figure out what type of camera I wanted, I started off with a camcorder. I started off with all different types of camcorders throughout the years, gradually improved the quality of my footage, and you can take a camcorder and shoot in 4K and get higher quality footage. The downside of shooting in 4K is the file size. So you're not going to be able to record as long, and it's going to take up more space on a memory card. What I like to do with my particular footage is I like to shoot in 1080p because I still get good quality footage, and then once I get it ready, once I get everything edited and ready to go, I will upscale it to 4K to go to YouTube. So it gives it just that little bit better quality once I get ready to upload the video. So this camera that I'm filming on right here is the Sony A6100, and it's got an APS-C sensor. So that's basically one step below a full frame camera. The reason why I ended up going with this particular camera, it's a mirrorless camera, so it's really giving you the best of both worlds as far as photos and videos. You basically can shoot stuff with a camcorder if you want to, but you really are not going to get the high quality pictures that you would get with a mirrorless camera. So it really gives you the option to shoot good cinematic footage or high quality photos, and you can send those to your phone and put them on Instagram and really build up an Instagram page to make everything look a little bit more professional. What I've found with this particular style of camera, this one has a flip up screen, and it's also a little bit better price point than what you're going to get with the full frame cameras. Anything in the full frame line, you're going to be looking at thousands of dollars just for the camera body. You can get professional footage, but I would say even with some of the APS-C stuff, just based upon some of the stuff that I've seen on YouTube, you can get some pretty comparable results. You just have to do some research and get familiar enough with it that you can get your settings dialed in correctly. One really nice thing about this particular camera, and I think a lot of the other Sonys have it, is something called S&Q mode. So with S&Q, there's a little dial on the back of the camera that goes through all your different settings for photo and video. And what you can do is flip that over to S&Q and shoot that in 120 frames per second. So basically all you have to do is flip over to one setting on your camera, shoot whatever you're trying to shoot for slow motion, and then go back to your regular movie setting and have those settings dialed in for 24 frames per second for the main stuff that you're trying to film. So this particular style of camera fits with a lens that I feel like is probably the best lens that you're going to find if you're any kind of hunter that's trying to make YouTube videos. And what this is, and it's on here right now, is the 18 to 105 millimeter f4. This particular type of lens, it's got a mechanical zoom. It's one of the few lenses that you can find that actually has a mechanical zoom. So on the side here, you've got a little zoom rocker, and it gives you the ability to basically use this just the same way you would with a camcorder, but it gives you a good quality image that is a noticeable difference from what you would see with a camcorder. And the other nice thing about this particular type of lens is it gives you the ability to use a remote. So what I use is just this little remote right here, and it allows me to zoom in just like you would with a camcorder, so you get the same kind of functionality that you would with a camcorder. Another great thing about this particular lens is it's an f4 aperture, and because it's an f4 aperture, it's a constant aperture. So a lot of these lenses you'll see, it'll say something like f2.8 to f5.6. So with that, it's a variable aperture. And what you need to realize with that as a hunter is that when you're dealing with a camcorder, for example, what you're seeing when you're zoomed out is going to be brighter than what you see once you zoom in. And you're really not going to notice it during the day. Anything that you're filming during the day should be fine, whether you've got a variable aperture or a constant aperture. But it's once you're getting to 4 o'clock, getting closer to 5 o'clock, and we all know that that's the time when it's more likely that you're going to see that big buck you're looking for. So the nice thing about having a mirrorless camera or a full frame camera is that it's going to pick up a whole lot more light. Really, you're going to be able to see better with your camera than you will even with your naked eye. The nice thing about having a better quality camera and a better quality lens is that it gives you a little bit better light. It allows you to film for a little bit longer time. One thing I would recommend as far as lenses go, if you've got a Sony camera, you don't have to get a Sony lens. I think there are adapters that will switch Sony and Canon and things like that. But Tamron and Sigma are some really good brands that have some high quality lenses. You can look those up and learn more about them. But those are usually what I would think to be the better way to go if you're trying to save some more money, because a lot of them will have very similar quality to what you would get with something like a Sony lens for much less money. So just something to keep in mind. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and set this up where I'm going to show you my setup for what I would do if I'm turkey hunting or if I'm hunting from the ground. So let's check that out. Alright, so what I wanted to show you here is kind of how I have my camera set up in a hunting situation. Part of the thing that you have to think about when you've got a mirrorless camera is how you want to have it set up. I know probably 80 to 90% of y'all are going to be hunting out of a tree stand, so it's going to be a completely different scenario for what you're trying to do. I do most of my hunting on the ground, and I've been trying to kind of perfect how I have my camera set up, and I'm starting to get a better idea of what that's going to look like and what's going to be the most efficient way to do it. So if you're in a tree stand, you're going to have a camera arm over here and your bow over here, however you want to try and get that set up. So then you're going to be able to swing it around wherever the deer's at and you know, usually get a pretty good idea of what your shot is going to look like. What I have found is that the camcorder, which I'm filming on now, I can set it up to the right, flip the screen around all the way to the side, so that then I can kind of make an adjustment on my tripod, and I'm basically like looking to my right to see, you know, where I need to be. That's how I would set it up on a camcorder. Now, for a mirrorless camera, most mirrorless cameras are not going to have a full, you know, flip out screen like this. So really have to think about how you want to position your camera where you can use your LCD screen correctly. You know, I started off trying to put it over here, and it works to an extent, but the problem of it is, and I'll just try and use my shotgun here as an example, and this is what happened to me when I was hunting the deer in Kentucky. I had the camera sitting over here, and I was also elevated in a little bit taller chair, but I had the camera set up, and I've got my gun, actually had it on my shooting sticks, but I've got the gun like this, and I've got the camera here. I had this buck walking from right to left, and the issue with the camera is the viewfinder, it gets harder and harder to see the image the more that you try and push left. So, you know, then you've kind of got to come back. You've got to, you know, try and determine what's going to be the best angle. I would say probably 85% of the reason why I didn't get that deer was because of trying to fool with the camera. When you're going to try and film your hunts, you've got to determine what's going to be best for what you're trying to do. So what I have found as far as using a camera in a tripod, what works better on a mirrorless camera, and this is specifically the Sony mirrorless cameras because of the way that their flip screen is. If you have a Canon camera or a Nikon, some of the more recent models of those cameras have a fully articulating flip screen that flips out just like a camcorder, and so you can have it sitting to the right and be angled like that, where you can see basically, you know, at a 90-degree angle, you can see your viewfinder. You know, everything works just a little bit smoother if you're trying to have the camera to your right. So what I've found with the Sony mirrorless cameras, what works better for me as a right-handed shooter is to throw this thing on the left. Now, you may get concerned that, you know, it's going to try and interfere with your shot angle here, and it may. It's, you know, really all going to depend on, you know, the size of your tripod. What I like about this particular tripod, this is the Manfrotto Compact, it's a lot smaller than a lot of the other tripods that you're going to find out there. You know, this one I believe is 17 inches, and it goes up to, I think, about 60. So it's just a little bit easier for me to set it up this way rather than trying to set it up the traditional way, you know, moving over to your right. So the nice thing about the Manfrotto tripod is it's got this little ability here to pivot pretty much however you want to do it. A lot of tripods have a fluid head that they use, and it still requires you to kind of adjust things a little bit. You know, you're still having to kind of use two hands to get your settings exactly like you want them. And with this, you're basically using this little wheel here that will allow you to, you know, pivot however you want, and then just kind of push it forward to lock it in. Another nice feature about this particular style of camera is you can plug it in to an external battery. So what I've got here is I've got my remote, and I'm going it's just velcroed on here. And then I've got my external battery that is just zip tied to the tripod. So you've got the ability to basically give you a whole lot more battery life to charge the camera while it's on standby. I will say with this particular remote, and really with the camera in general, this plug is only going to work for one or the other. So you can't really charge it and use a remote at the same time. So that's something you're gonna have to kind of make a decision about. You know, what I would do is basically once I'm set up, you know, ready to use my remote, then I can just take this off and wrap it around, and then I can take this, plug it in. You can see the green light come on. And so now I can take this and I can zoom in. This also will turn the camera on and off with the remote. You just have to switch it on the actual camera, but then you can still power it on and off with the remote. So it gives you a little bit of an advantage there. What I like to do as far as sitting on the ground is I'll have the main camera, I've got the GoPro here, and then I've got my older GoPro that I can set up either using this, and I can attach it to a limb or whatever that's behind me. I'll have it just kind of set up watching me over the shoulder, and I've got a little remote that came with this to begin with. That's been the easiest way that I've found to try and control your GoPro and get everything set up that way. You can use the Bluetooth or the Wi-Fi features on your phone, and it'll, you know, kind of give you an indication of what that looks like. I've just found that sometimes I get a bad connection from the phone, and it's not always reliable. It's really easy enough for me to just have the remote in my pocket somewhere, or like in my turkey vest, just hit record and it's ready to go. Now, another thing that I decided to get this year is a Tacticam. The nice thing about the Tacticam is you're really only going to use it if you see something to shoot. So, I mean, I hear sometimes people talk about, you know, their Tacticam goes dead on them, or, you know, they don't like the image quality or whatever. This is just the Tacticam Solo. The 5.0 is supposed to have a lot better image quality, and I think a little bit more of a zoom on it. But really, for the price, I think the Solo works just fine. Another key accessory is a Peak Design backpack clip. It's basically just a little slide that goes onto your camera where the tripod screw would go, and slides into this little device that's attached to your backpack. So it gives you a little bit easier access to your camera and allows you to be hands-free. Most of what I've used has been just a camera strap, and I find that camera strap, especially when I was turkey hunting this year, was really getting in the way, and it was just kind of dangling around. Definitely don't recommend that if you're trying to hunt in swampland. You definitely want to have some way of keeping the camera out of any kind of water. I say all this to say you don't have to get each and every single one of these types of cameras if you're going to film your hunts. You know, this is just sort of stuff that's kind of accumulated over the years that I, you know, progressively tried to improve my setup. You can get a main camera and a 360 camera, and that would be enough. Or you can get, you know, some over the shoulder angle with the GoPro. You know, there's different ways to do it, and a lot of it is just trial and error. One thing that I was using this past deer season a lot was just using my main camera on a camera strap where I can get all of my main footage, and then when the time comes that I'm seeing an animal that I'm gonna try and shoot, I can have the GoPro on, or more specifically the Tacticam, and use this specifically for the moment where I'm ready to shoot. So basically, I just decided I'm putting the main camera down. This is, you know, really something that I think a lot of people maybe tend to forget about, is that, you know, you don't have to have this tripod setup, you know, if you feel like it's going to be too much for you. If you're trying to, you know, up your image quality, up your production quality, you know, I would say go with something like a mirrorless camera. It's really all dependent upon the situation. This is just something that I've found that works for me. But really, I just wanted to try and show you a little bit about my setup and some of the stuff that I like to use and what I found that's worked for me. So if you got any comments or questions about camera gear, I'll try and answer what I can. You know, drop a comment below with what your setup is. I think that's going to do it for this video. So thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.